Hello, hello. Let's get started. Welcome to yet another webinar in our series of Science of Reading webinars. I'm Yevgen Borodin, the CEO of Capti, and as usual, I'll be your host and facilitator. We hope that today's webinar will help you to demystify the Lexile metric. To be fair, most educators know about Lexile. Many educators use it, but as it turns out, not everyone is using it correctly. That's why we decided it's worth devoting time to clarifying some misconceptions about Lexile Framework. And Dr. Margaret Opatz, a former teacher and interventionist, and now a reading research scientist here at Capti, is the best person to do it. We hope that this webinar will give you a recipe for how to use Lexile correctly and effectively, and will convince you that it's worth your time paying attention to Lexile, but not relying on it exclusively for informing your instructional approaches to teaching reading. We can get right to the topic. Take it away, Margaret.
All right, thank you. Well, I'm excited to be here today to talk about the Lexile Framework and clarifying some misconceptions that we found when we did our own survey of educators. So the way that today will look, we will start with reviewing the Lexile Framework. I know it's been around for decades, but I think it's good just to remind ourselves what it is and what it measures. So then we'll go through the survey results that I mentioned, our in-house survey that we conducted with educators across the nation. And then I'm going to go through some of the misconceptions that we found from our survey. And then I want to present what I believe is the real power of Lexile. So we'll take a little time there, and then we'll have time for questions and answers. So first, I just want to start off by establishing what the Lexile Framework for reading is and what its intent really is when we think about text leveling. So when we think about Lexile, we have this scale, and the scale exists to really place text within a framework that provides a quantifiable measure. So this measure ranges from BR 300, which means beginning reader 300, and it goes all the way up to 2000. 2000 is the max level. And when you think about the max level, it would be very rare for a student to get there. So Lexile computes a score for a text based off of the sentence complexity and the frequency of words within the text. And then it also provides a metric for readers. So a reader takes an assessment and gets the same level as the text. So they're placed on that same metric, that same scale, to say, this is what a student can comprehend. And this really came about from the time that the Common Core, it had like this reigniting of text leveling when Common Core came out. And we had this clear picture that students were ready for college and career once they hit this level of about 1600. So that's really what Lexile is. It provides this scale. And then it also can help us see where students are falling at within their grade levels. So within the chart that I have here on the screen, you can see that there are various bands for grade levels. And Lexile actually has this framework where you can go in and set the percentiles. So I have this one set from the 10th percentile and the 90th percentile for each grade level. And it's at the beginning of the year, middle of year, and end of year. So based off of students' results, you can really see, are students at grade level? Where are they falling within the grade level? And that's a helpful tool to be able to see where students are falling within the grade level. Lexile also provides the means to determine what level of text you're presenting to students. So I went into Lexile's, they have a hub, and I went in and I selected that I wanted to show a group of texts from an astronomy collection at the 7th grade level. So that's another tool that Lexile can really help us with, is really being able to see a group of texts that are within a grade level. But also this could be used if I had a student who was reading around that 960 level as well. So when we think about Lexile, its greatest feature is that it has a common metric. So it takes a text and a reader and allows us to match students to various texts that they should be able to comprehend. So that's kind of like the framework of Lexile. Now that we've gone over what Lexile is, now I'd like to take you through the survey that we conducted and go through the results. So really, when we thought about doing a survey on Lexile, we wanted to see the current reality of how teachers and educators are using Lexile within their classrooms, but then also within their schools and districts. So that was really our purpose. And we sent this out across the nation, and we had 159 respondents. So most of the respondents were teachers, but we also had a significant number of literacy specialists and principals as well. So as I mentioned, our real purpose was just to see how teachers are using it. And then also we wanted to just see if they were satisfied with their use of Lexile. So first, we asked participants just to share how important they felt Lexile really is. And what we found is that most educators find it to be at least important. So it's an important measure. And then given our reality of our new world post-COVID, we wanted to see if there was any difference from before COVID to their perception now. And what we found is that there wasn't a huge shift. And it was interesting. We had an open-ended response after teachers and educators responded to this question. And we found that a lot of them had a similar sentiment to Lexile's always been important, that there's really no difference in importance. But then we also had some interesting responses that were suggesting that because students have more gaps from before COVID, that knowing their Lexile is more important now so that their needs can be met. Some other educators also mentioned that it's really just like that measure of linguistic difficulty for the text. So when they use Lexile, they're interpreting it very carefully to say that this is these are the linguistic features of the text that students can comprehend. So they wanted to just make a note of that we're looking at linguistic features. So it's sometimes difficult to suggest that reading comprehension should be judged purely based off of Lexile, which I think is an important point. The next thing that we asked teachers was just about their satisfaction, how satisfied they were with Lexile. And again, most were at least somewhat satisfied. Some were very satisfied with the information that they get from Lexile or the overall features of Lexile. That the next question that we asked really focused on if they were satisfied with the information that they get from Lexile. And again, they said, most of them, the respondents said that they were somewhat satisfied or very satisfied with the results or with the information. So then we asked how comfortable, go ahead there. Okay, then we asked how comfortable or confident they were in interpreting students' Lexile measures. And again, we found that most they felt confident in doing it, at least somewhat confident to very confident or completely confident. So we also wanted to know, because Lexile is really just this holistic, it gives us one number for students, we wanted to know if educators wanted to have other metrics that went along with Lexile to really tell why students were receiving their Lexile level. So we asked this question about how important would it be to have other metrics that measured other reading skills coupled with Lexile. And you can see that the majority of respondents thought that that would be important or very important. And our final question, we asked about time. And it seems that time is really important. And I think this just speaks to the efficiency of assessment needs to be managed in a way where you can get really meaningful data in a short period of time. It seems as though the respondents in our survey definitely wanted something that could be given in one class period in order to really be able to just take the assessment and then be able to make meaning from that assessment to be able to create these instructional plans for students. So then we asked how teachers are currently using Lexile, and we found that some respondents are not using Lexile at all, but then others are using it to measure students' reading levels at the class, school, and district level. They're also using it to show progress over time, to communicate with parents, and then to level text within a classroom or school library, and ultimately match students with text. So I think that's those were good, that's good information for us to know about how teachers and educators are using Lexile. So we had multiple open-ended responses throughout the survey, and there were a couple that came up that are important to address. So the first one is that we had teachers respond that in a way that suggested that Lexile can be used as a diagnostic assessment tool. And this is concerning for multiple reasons. But first and foremost, Lexile is not a diagnostic tool. And I'm going to go a little bit deeper into why it's not a diagnostic tool. So I just want to remind you that when we think about Lexile, it's helpful because it places students' abilities and a text on the same scale, and it can provide us a metric that matches students to text. So if we were to say that this is a diagnostic tool, that would be like taking our temperature and then jumping to like some type of conclusion that just isn't true. So we get this one data point, but it doesn't tell us why a student is doing how they're doing, or in this case, why a temperature is what it is. So let's just look at a temperature. So if somebody has a fever, a high temperature, there are multiple reasons that could be causing the temperature. It could be something as simple as, I have a young son. It could be that I dressed him in too many clothes and that's why there is a fever. But it could also be something a lot more severe. So when we think about a diagnostic is really intended to figure out what's causing something. So in the medical field, if you had a fever, the doctor, and it wasn't just like something simple, right? It wasn't something that like you could take care of on your own. The doctor would want to figure out more. They'd want to look at your vital signs. They'd want to run more assessments before really determining what's causing the fever, especially if it's one of these other, like more extreme diseases. We'd want to do more testing. And that's the same within Lexile. Like Lexile is one measure that tells us the text level that a student can comprehend. So in reading, a diagnostic reading assessment assists teachers in being able to know what students' current abilities are within specific skills. It also helps teachers gain knowledge about how students can be supported in improving their reading skills. And then third, it helps us make instructional decisions, which all lead to creating an action plan. And then from that action plan, once you have an intervention going or some type of instruction that's supporting students, then that leads to improved reading outcomes. Then when you think about that too, once you have improved reading outcomes, you're going to give that assessment again. You're going to go back to through this cycle of continuously helping students improve. When you think about Lexile, Lexile can't do that because it's giving you this one data point, like your temperature, but it's not telling you why the score is there as it is, or what to do with the score. So that was the first misconception. Another that came up, and this one came up frequently as well. And this one is, I assume it's a hot topic because I received a message saying, can I call you to talk about this one? So that was an interesting experience to have. But some of our respondents discussed using Lexile as a prescription for a text level for students to read. So they focused on that just right text level. And some teachers, when the teacher that called me and to talk to me about this, went to the extreme of finding text, buying the text, and then giving students the text at that just right level, and did this continuously throughout the year. And then she was really dismayed to find that her students didn't improve. By the end of the year, they didn't grow any closer to grade level because they had been reading at this just right level. So when you think about that, I really like to run, so running came to mind. So if you were to train for a marathon and you were to run 3 miles every day at a comfortable pace, you probably won't be able to comfortably run a marathon, or maybe you won't even be able to finish the 26.2 miles. And I don't think that is hard to understand when you think about it. If you really want to run a marathon, you're probably going to have to follow some type of training plan, and you're going to need to increase your running over time. You're going to have to do some long runs, and that might not be at that just right level for you. You might have to push yourself to expand your abilities. And that's the same thing that's true for Lexile and for reading. So if a student can easily read every text and they're never pushed to a higher complexity, then they're probably just going to stay at that same level because they're not being pushed to increase their ability to comprehend more complex texts. So if the student can read the text easily, that's comfortable. But we also know that there's this zone of proximal development, and students really need to be at that level where they can comprehend the text with a little bit of support, but then that we keep increasing the complexity over time to really get students closer to grade level, if not right at grade level. So this really leads me into, based off of our survey results, after talking with educators and reading through the results, kind of coming to this conclusion of what the power of Lexile truly is. And I think the number one thing that we learned from our survey is that Lexile really can offer a starting point. It can't really provide us with anything beyond that. We have this starting point, and then it can show us progress over time, but it offers us the ability to say, this is where a student is at right now. But that's a great thing to have. A starting point is a great place to start with in what students need. So there are lots of stories out right now about how Lexile can help combat learning loss. And these stories come from schools across the nation that have used Lexile in this post-COVID world. And they've done it really strategically by using it as a starting point. and then creating this bridge that helps students get closer to grade level, if not at grade level. So the way that schools have done this is they've administered Lexile, and then they've set this end goal to say, okay, here's where our students are at, and here's where we want them to be. So they've used the end of grade level expectation and set that as their end goal. So they're really using this like backwards design model to be able to support students in reaching grade level proficiency by the end of the year, according to Lexile. In the stories that have been shared about this, the teachers have really focused on a subject area. So whether that's social studies or science, they've focused on this one specific area, and then they've designed their units on that specific topic within that content area, found appropriate texts, and then sequence the text to be able to increase the text complexity over time. But because the texts are all on the same content, they're building students' background knowledge, which then helps them access more complex texts over time. So they're really being able to access these complex texts by providing this bridge, constructing this bridge that over time leads to grade level proficiency. So as I think about the way that schools are doing this, I think one of the biggest things that is needed is using a diagnostic reading assessment that goes along with Lexile. And based off of the survey results and within like that, the text leveling world and research, it's really important to be able to know why students receive the Lexile level that they are receiving. And I think that the best way to get there is to use a diagnostic reading assessment to really capture the full power of Lexile, because again, Lexile is that starting point, and then we also know where the end goal is. So that's where I'm going to head next. Is I'm going to show you a diagnostic reading assessment that can really help pinpoint why students are receiving the Lexile level that they are. So let's jump there. So I'm going to take you to Capti's website. And I'm going to log in as a teacher and show you really the power of this diagnostic assessment that can help pinpoint why students receive the Lexile level that they do, and why they can comprehend at the specific level that they're at. So as I jump into this, I'm going to start off with creating an assignment just to show you what skills are assessed along with Lexile. So this is Capti's platform, and the assessment is called ReadBasix. So ReadBasix assesses 5 foundational reading skills and then basic reading comprehension. And what's sort of unique about this is that you can assess individual foundational skills. So let's say I just wanted to look at sentence processing, or I just wanted to look at word recognition and decoding. I can do that with this assessment. Or if I want to give the full battery and find out how students are doing across the full spectrum of foundational reading skills and basic reading comprehension, you can do that as well. And what's sort of nice is that you're going to be able to see how long it will roughly take. So if you do all of them, that's 76 minutes. That might be too long for some students. So if you wanted to cut down on the amount of time, you can just select the amount of time that you have and then give those that specific subtest. So most of the subtests, with the exception of reading comprehension, are 10 minutes or less. Okay, so then once students complete the assessment, you can go into the reports and see how they've done. So I'm going to go into a specific class. For today, I'm focusing on grade 7. So this initial screen shows me how many students I have, and then how many have completed each of the subtests. In my fictional data, all of my students have completed this subtest. So now I'm going into my class, and I'm going to be able to see how students have done globally. So I'm seeing this global picture of my class. And here I can see their profiles. So we have these profiles of high, medium, and low. And these reflect the average performance on the subtests. So if students performed across those 6 subtests, then if they performed across those 6 subtests at a medium level, then they'd get medium. If they were on average at the high level, then they'd get the high profile. But there's also this notable profile. So notable profiles have come from the data across hundreds of thousands of administrations of ReadBasix. And what ETS found is that there are specific profiles where students have performed at extreme levels on the various subtests. And this might indicate some type of reading disability. So it could indicate that a student is compensating for dyslexia if they've performed at extremes on word recognition, decoding, and comprehension. But it could also show you that a student's really good at decoding, but is struggling with comprehension, and they're considered a word caller. So those are the profiles. So you can see how students are performing across the profiles. You can see whether or not students have completed the subtests. So as I mentioned before, 100% of my students have completed the subtests. And then you're going to get the scale score. So you'll be able to see how students are doing according to an absolute scale. So this absolute scale does not change from grade to grade, which is kind of helpful in terms of being able to observe change across grade levels. So if a student took ReadBasix in 7th grade and then again in 8th grade, that same metric is being used, so you can really compare the data across grade levels. And then you also can see grade equivalency. Red is 2 or more grade levels below, orange is 1 grade level below, and then green is at or above. And then the final thing you'll see on this this part of the report is the RTI tier recommendations. And what's helpful here is you can customize the thresholds for the recommendations based on your capacity to provide interventions and based on the grade levels that you teach or provide services for. So next, I'm going to go into students. So I've started globally, and now I'm getting more and more specific to individual students and their individual skills. So on this page, I have my list of students, and then I have their Lexile, and then the subtests. So this is actually really helpful, this view here, specifically with what we're talking about today. So you can see the Lexile, and when you get this metric of the Lexile score, I mentioned it doesn't tell us why they're performing the way that they are, but the beauty of coupling Lexile with a diagnostic assessment is you start to see why their score is the way that it is. So I'm going to take you into one specific student. I'm going to show you Chloe. So Chloe here is she has a medium profile. So that means that she's probably or that she is scoring at that low or high average across her subtests. And you can actually see green is high average, and then this orange color is low average. So that makes sense. She's mostly scoring within the average performance levels. So as I scroll down, here is Chloe's Lexile performance across the school year. So she's scored, and you can see her progress here, that her score has improved across the year. So this is another benefit of having a diagnostic assessment with that. You may not know why her score has improved across the year, but having a diagnostic assessment coupled with Lexile really does help to show the full picture of why Chloe's scores have improved across the school year. So you get Lexile, but you also get an individual report for each student. And this really helps to illuminate how the reader has improved across the year. And it also tells you what the student can do and then what they may also benefit from. And that's for each of the subtests. So each foundational skill, students receive that level of information, for each of the subtests. So then the next view is the report history. And I really like this view in terms of just being able to see that growth over time. So I mentioned that this is fictional data. However, it's based off of real users and real interventions that have taken place. So specifically with Chloe, her teacher knew that she was at 229. And researchers from ETS have found that if you score below 235 on the word recognition and decoding, that is a specific threshold that actually suggests that students' ability to decode impedes, I should say their inability to decode impedes their ability to comprehend. But once they are above 235 on ReadBasix, then there is correlation between word recognition and reading comprehension. So her teacher, knowing that, supported Chloe in developing the sound to letter correspondence, being able to decode accurately, and then also worked on word analysis. And what that means is like focusing on syllabication rules and being able to apply those rules in decoding multisyllabic words and really being able to access the word orally and then being able to read it. And that actually led into vocabulary morphology improving as well, because she was able to actually read the words. And she had a big oral language vocabulary, but her reading vocabulary was limited because she wasn't able to actually decode the words. So this view to me is just a great way to illustrate how instruction can really improve specific skills, but then those that improvement of one specific skill actually improves other skills over time. And here you can see too, then it improves the Lexile as well. This, I'm showing you the scores here, but you could also look at grade equivalency and percentile. Then the final thing that I want to show you within this report is that we have put together recommendations. And the way that we did this is we looked at all of the research on how to best support students in each of these foundational skills. And we created recommendations that that follow a scope and sequence of best practices or evidence-based practices. So we started with the end in mind. We started with that strong performance level and then said, okay, if this is where we want students to get, where do we want, how can we sequence this to really be able to support students across the performance levels to reach that strong performance level. So each of the subtests, the foundational reading skills, has that scope and sequence that's designed to help teachers with a starting point. And I think this also kind of just like illustrates how we can support students in getting closer to grade level expectations within their reading, because really the ultimate goal here is to create skilled readers. So that is what I wanted to show you there. Now I'm going to bring us back here. So yeah, when we think about coupling Lexile with a diagnostic reading assessment, I think what I've just shown you really illuminates why it's so helpful to have a diagnostic assessment that illuminates the why behind the the one specific Lexile score.
Yep. So Lexile is now available in Capti Assess with the TS ReadBasix. Capti is a literacy solution that helps assess, accommodate, and accelerate reading. It was funded with Department of Education Research grants and National Science Foundation. Let's go to the next slide. And next slide, please. Okay, and just to touch base on this ReadBasix assessment, these are the 6 skills that it assesses and the amount of time it takes per subtest. And what's notable is that there are at least 30 items, 30 questions that students are asked per subtest, which is what makes this assessment probably one of the most accurate ones. And the depth of the assessment helps gives you a big picture, a broad picture of what students are capable of doing in each skill. And since you can assess any skill separately, it really cuts down on the assessment time because you can focus on, if you identify the students as struggling in morphology, administer an interventional morphology and just use a quick 5 to 10 minute subtest to measure student progress and not have to do the entire thing all over again. Next slide. And to simplify implementation, Capti Assess supports Google Classroom, Schoology, Clever, Canvas, and many different student information systems and single sign-ons, and ClassLink support is coming in soon as well. Next slide. Also, there's professional development training. Actually, ReadBasix comes with free basic training. It takes 30 to 90 minutes, depending on how many people are being trained, and it covers how to use this assessment. There's also a separate paid PD that helps teachers be more effective, covering the science of reading and foundational skills, who, when, how should be assessed, and how to interpret the data. And also, Margaret leads data sessions, helping you interpret the data. Thank you for attending. We hope that you found this useful. And since a lot of people said that that their school could definitely improve how Lexile is used, I hope you will be the driving force in your schools and share this webinar with your colleagues. And we'll see an improvement in everybody's reading. Thank you very much for attending. Have a wonderful day.